Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Alan Clare. Alan is Senior Vice President, Power Operations for TVA, responsible for all non-nuclear power generation. Alan, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I ask what is your favorite form of power generation, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show. Aside from my oat milk latte, and, I've been given a hard time at times about liking foo-foo coffee, as the guys in the plant used to accuse me of. I would say I also have a cup filled with gratitude. I'm just really appreciative of the opportunities and the blessings that I've received over the course of my career and my life.
Yeah.
And then landing here in Chattanooga, working for a fantastic company like the Tennessee Valley Authority that does so much for the people across the Tennessee Valley, aligns well with my own moral compass or North Star, if you would. When I think about this mission of service that TVA has, so being able to be part of that, being able to be part of really just a tremendous group of folks that really do care about the communities that we live in. It's just a fantastic opportunity. So my cup is filled with gratitude.
And that's a great way to put it. And what a way to start the morning, with a cup of gratitude, to wake up every morning and really show that or feel that gratitude for what you have.
Indeed.
Yeah. Now, oat milk. Why oat milk? I got to ask, because the guys are going to be going, okay, oat milk.
Yeah. Well, one, it's supposedly less fattening. I try
not fat.
I'm trying not to get there, Mike. That's relative, right? So,
yes,
my wife started drinking oat milk. I don't have any lactose issues or anything, but I tasted it. Initially, I was kind of turned off by the thought, but as I've drunk more and more, and I usually have 1 or 2 cups of coffee. That's it. Yeah. Any more than that, I can't sleep. But as I've gotten more and more used to oat milk, I've gotten to the point where I enjoy it in my coffee.
Do you?
Yeah.
And in terms of a little too much coffee, I've suffered through the same thing, but I've switched to decaf years ago. And so I just enjoy the flavor and the routine, and it wakes me up in that way, not in the caffeine way.
Yeah, same here. And I've got an espresso machine at home, so I make my own, lattes in the morning. And again, I'm one latte in the morning, I'm good for the rest of the day.
That sounds like a great way to start the day. So you've got a very interesting background. I've never met anyone from Belize, and I know everyone likes to go to Belize and enjoy that. But you were born in Belize. Can you talk about that and how that all came about, that you're in Belize?
Yeah, I was. So I was born in Belize, only child for my mom and dad. My mom had me when she was fairly young. She was 20 years old. And unmarried, still trying to figure out what she wanted to do with her life. And so at the time, I had an uncle who was in the British military. Belize is a former British colony. And my uncle had joined the British military and offered to take me back to England and really kind of just give my mom an opportunity to kind of get her life together. And so, of course, it wasn't my decision to make, right? Yeah. So I was sent to England with my uncle at the age of 5, so pretty young age.
That is young.
I was over there and spent time in Netheravon, which is a British military town somewhere outside of Colchester. I know it was close to Stonehenge because we used to visit there a few times, southeast England. And then from there, went to Germany, spent a year or so in Belgium, and then went back to England. But I was there from the age of 5 until about 14.
That's a long time to be away from your mom. I'm assuming you were away from your mom.
Yes, yeah. So I didn't see my mom, my biological father. I really didn't get to know, and he passed when I was 12. So I really didn't get to know, meet or know him. And, you know, having raised two kids of my own now, I can only imagine what my uncle was dealing with, because I'm sure I'm not the easiest kid.
Yeah.
And my wife would probably say I'm not the easiest adult. But nonetheless, was there till I was 14. And then I ended up, my uncle shipped me back to mom when I was about 14. At the time, she was in the process of migrating to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Her family had moved to the U.S. and she was getting ready to do the same. And so I was in Belize for about a year and a half, and then brought to the U.S. with mom at the age of 16 or so.
Did your uncle have a family, or did he, as a single man, say, I'm going to take care of Alan?
Yeah. No, he was married,
Uh-huh.
but they didn't have kids at the time.
Yeah.
And so, again, just, you know, through the goodness of their heart, offered to take me to England and open my eyes to some things that I probably would not have seen had I stayed in Belize.
That had to be an interesting way to grow up. I mean, you leaving it at 5 and going with your uncle, and you're going to England. You also spent some time in Germany and Belgium too, right?
Yes. Interesting indeed. Challenges and opportunities, right? As you can imagine, I was the only child of color in most cases, most of the places we lived, most of the places we went. Not having that opportunity to kind of grow up in sort of the same neighborhood and get to know, you know, growing up with kids that you kind of tend to bond with and develop these relationships and these friendships with. So as a result, one, I became fiercely independent because, you know, never wanted to be a burden, right? So I've always kind of had this this feeling, this desire to where, you know, I need to make sure that I am not a burden, whether on my uncle or whichever household that I landed in, which I think has a lot to do with my drive and personality, quite honestly.
Yeah, and I bet it did, because did you take that not wanting to be a burden, and because you said sports were very important to you?
It was.
And that drive you into football in England and wanting to be a footballer and excel at that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I've always been a pretty good athlete, and fortunately never, academically also did well. But my focus was really on sport. I love sports, right?
Yeah.
So played cricket. I was good at track and field and really good at soccer. And I did well in the time that I played. I ended up banging up my knee, and so I had to give up on my dream of becoming a footballer, but nonetheless, I still got to play, in my adult years. I had to give it up. I was playing in an adult league. I was plant manager at the time in North Carolina, working for Progress Energy, and I remember showing up to work one day with this big black eye, right? Because I got an elbow, and I could not tell them that I was not in a fight, right? It was like, no, I caught an elbow, right? And they're like, sure, Alan, sure. So long story short, I said, I have to ease up. I've got to give up on the football.
Now, when you were a kid and you're moving around, sports was obviously important. You're going to new schools too. Did you find that the sports enabled you to gravitate towards a group of friends who were like-minded in sports?
Absolutely. And ironically, I saw the same thing with my youngest, because my youngest is a bit of a social butterfly. And when we had to leave, he grew up, born and raised in Syracuse, New York. Matter of fact, Syracuse, New York is where I've played, or I've lived the longest when I think about my, my adult life and journey. And so when we had to leave Syracuse, a place that he had been born, raised, had all his friends, it was really difficult for him.
How old was he when you left?
He was 15.
Yeah, that's a hard time.
Yeah. And so getting him acclimated to, we moved to Pinehurst, North Carolina.
Nice place.
It is. He went to Pinecrest High School and played, for the local team. And then majority of the folks that played on the JV and varsity team played on the local travel team. And that was his way to acclimate and kind of, get
find a friend group.
Yeah. So to your question, yes, it definitely helped.
Yeah.
But we moved around so much, right? It was difficult.
Yeah. And one of the other things you mentioned were some of the, you weren't just studying and you weren't just playing sports. You working a bit too. Deliver newspapers, delivering milk.
Absolutely.
Not oat milk, I'm sure.
Yeah. No. In England, they still have milk in the glass bottles, and so I would hustle a local milkman and say, hey, let me help you deliver some of these stuff in the neighborhood, because what they would do is you typically would drop off a couple bottles of milk on the doorstep every morning, and then also in England. Again, this is late 80s, mid 80s time frame, early 80s time frame. they were still burning coal in fireplaces, all right? So they had every yard, and this is British military town, but they had coal bunkers in the backyard. And so helping to fill those bunkers with coal in the wintertime, right, which is what they were using primarily for heat in some of these homes.
So you weren't going and applying for a job. You were seeing the guys delivering stuff and saying, "Hey, for a few extra pounds,
couple shillings, couple
yeah.
shillings, yeah." Pounds was a lot of money back then.
Yeah, still is today.
Yeah, true.
What drove you to do that? I mean, in terms of, because you're just a kid in the neighborhood playing around and say, you know what, I could use a couple extra bucks.
Again, I think it's that not wanting to be a burden, right?
Yeah.
It's that wanting to kind of, again, just fierce independence. When you're shipped off at the age of 5,
right,
you kind of have to start forging your way in life. And it's funny because I ended up joining the Navy, ultimately the U.S. Navy, when I came to the U.S. And it aligned well, again, with sort of that North Star of mine, right? Yeah. Service, independence. When you're at sea and something breaks, you don't call the local Maytag man or AAA. You have to fix it, right?
Yeah.
And so I developed sort of this reputation as a fixer.
And that contributed to your independence. Obviously wanting to be fiercely independent yourself, but not being a burden on everyone else. Talk about coming to the States. So you, how old, 12 or 15?
No, I was almost 16.
Almost 16. What was that like? So you spent better part of your life growing up in England and Europe, and all of a sudden you're coming to the States and you're reuniting with your mom?
Yeah. My mom and I still have a little bit of a love-hate relationship, to be quite honest. Love her to death, but, we agree and disagree in certain things, and that's okay, all right? Yeah. But coming to the U.S. again, she was still trying to get kind of on her feet and establish her life. And so for me, it was, again, trying to find myself and what I wanted to do with my life, which I still at that point was unsure. I had an uncle who owned a small construction company. This is an uncle on my father's side. Mm-hmm. And so I started working with him, and that was a tremendous experience. I learned a lot of life skills that even to this day that I use. I love to work with wood, but did everything from masonry to framing, sheetrock, cabinetry, hang doors and flooring. I mean, we did it all, right? Because what my uncle would do is buy these brownstones in Brooklyn, gut them, and basically build them back out. So everything from floor joists, flooring, framing, right, the A to Z. And I was working a lot with this older gentleman. He had to be about almost 75. And he was out there every day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m, sheetrock, framing. And a lot of times he would do it by himself, which was remarkable because you're talking, 4x8, 4x10 sheets of sheetrock, and even overhead. I mean, he had this method where he would build his own T out of 2x4 to hold up one end, and then he'd manually hold up the other end and be shooting screws, right? So it was amazing to see. But I learned a lot from this gentleman, what to do in life and what not to do. And one of the things he always harped on me is figure out what you want to do in life. Don't end up like me, 70 years old, having to, lifting sheetrock over my head. Similarly, I got to work alongside just some brilliant craftsmen. I remember this one bricklayer, Italian bricklayer, older gentleman as well. Had a little bit of a drinking problem, but if you catch him sober, he could build a Taj Mahal. I mean, incredible individual, and learned so much laying, blocks. We built out a bank in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And again, the things, some of those lessons you learn in life have just been incredible that I've been able to kind of apply as I've been on this life journey of my own.
Well, it seems like, in just talking to you a little bit, that your fierce independence brought on by leaving at 5, you had people come into your life, whether it was the carpenter or maybe even the guy you're helping fill the coal bunkers with, learning things from them about their lives and things they were teaching you.
Yeah, 100%, Mike. And it's why I feel it's so important for me to pay forward. Yeah. Because at those critical junctures in my life, and you could imagine, right, teenager, New York, I could have gone down many different paths, and a lot of them not good. But for those folks that came into in my life at the right moments, that helped steer me right to where I am today, it was incredibly important. And so I feel, that I have a responsibility to try to do the same.
And you're in New York and going to high school. And what do you do when you get out? Did you know what you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's the thing. No, I was still working with my uncle, still, trying to learn a trade, so to speak. And then I actually ran into a recruiter. He was a Navy recruiter. I was heading to work and ran into this guy, and he kind of pulled me aside and just started having a conversation with me. It was like, hey, kid, you seem pretty decent shape. He's like, what's your academics like? Have you ever thought about the military? And at that point, it's like, okay, sure. Tell me, what do you have to offer?
Had you thought about it to that point?
Yes and no, but not seriously.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was just out there.
Yeah. It was one of the many options, right? And so, but this gentleman really kind of pulled me aside and steered me down the path, kind of laid out a roadmap of what that could look like. And I must say, it was intriguing, right? Because one, it involved travel, and I love to travel. I loved, already had seen a lot of the world,
right?
Was eager to see more. But more so really to learn a skill, a trade that I could apply, in as I got older and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in my life.
When you were in high school, and you said you were pretty good at academics, and I'm just trying to tie this into the technical aspect of TVA. Was that something that was in your mind in high school? Like, I could do electrical engineering, or I could do this, or was it more when you got into the Navy and got specific?
Yeah, it really wasn't until I got in the Navy, because up to that point it had been really more the crafts, carpentry, the framing, sheetrock, cabinetry, all of that stuff, and really the sort of the more electrical and mechanical aspects didn't come into play until I joined the Navy, and I was enlisted, right? So I, you take what's called the ASVAB, which is kind of an aptitude test, and then depending on how you score, you get to kind of pick, a different, what they call it, ratings. It's really sort of a skill, right? That you would go to school and then you'd be able to apply out in the field. And I got assigned, I got to pick gas turbine electrical. At the time, again, I'm kind of this athletic, I wanted to be something exciting. I was thinking, like special forces or something along those lines. But again, this senior chief, I didn't know him from Adam, somehow saw my score, came and found me, pulled me aside and said, hey, young man, looked at your scores. There's this fairly new rate here in the Navy. It's gas turbines. And I think this is an area that you would do really well and you should really consider it. And
what would you do with gas turbines as part of your job?
So basically, I worked in gas turbine control systems, right? So I was on Aegis class cruisers. So the ships you see on CNN firing missiles all the time, those typically would be an Aegis class cruiser. Okay. And today, I think those are being phased out and being replaced by Arleigh Burkes, but the same concept. It's a guided missile cruiser. But you have propulsion systems. You've got an electrical plant on board that ship, along with all of the fire control systems and radar and everything else. So I worked on sort of the engineering side of the vessel. So started off in the engine room, basically as essentially like a walking around, taking readings and monitoring equipment, operating equipment. Worked my way up to engine room supervisor. And because I worked in the control system, so when something breaks, right, typically you have to call whoever that subject matter expert is on that system. And, control systems tend to be black box to a lot of people. So when something breaks immediately, it's the controls, right? So I would have to either go prove or disprove. And so worked my way up from there to the what's called the central control room, which is sort of, you're out of the belly of the ship now. You're in an nice air-conditioned space.
You're not down below.
Yeah. And qualified basically in every console. So you've got your propulsion auxiliary control console, you've got your electrical plant control console, you've got damage control. But I worked on all of those things. And so it was a lot easier for me, I believe, to kind of get qualified and be able to operate those.
Yeah, you learn the ship from the ground up. Really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And the same thing with the plant. So when I left the Navy, I was a field service engineer for a bit, and then actually went to go work at the plant. And so did startup, construction, startup, commissioning. So similarly, right, learn it from the ground up.
Well, and in talking to a few of the TVA folks we have, their career paths similar in that you learn it a step at a time.
Yes.
And you build upon it. Now, how long were you in the Navy?
6 years. So I did 2 years of school, basically a year of what they call A school, went out to a ship, USS Yorktown, CG-47, 2 years at sea, went back to what's called C school, which is sort of advanced school, and then went back out to another ship on the USS Normandy, which is a CG-60.
Now, when you say 2 years at sea, is that literally you're gone for 2 years at sea? Or?
Yeah. So we used to joke, CG stands for Guided Missile Cruiser, right? So every ship has a 2-letter designation. If DD would be a destroyer. We used to joke and say CG stood for constantly gone because Aegis class cruisers, they didn't stay in port long, right? Because they're critical to the naval strategy. So they're always out at sea supporting a battle group.
And they're needed in different parts of the world
Absolutely.
At different times. So you got to be ready to go at any time.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting place you went to on one of those?
Most fun place, Malaga. Most interesting place. We pulled into, I think it was Ankara, Turkey. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was very interesting. And back then we had a little bit more freedoms than we probably would today. I remember we pulled into, we're somewhere off of coast of Egypt, and actually got to go visit the pyramids. And,
nice.
4-wheeling in the desert, right? A lot of fun things, because they would set up sort of these excursion trips for us, and you could sign up and go do. But again,
that was pre 9/11.
Exactly, exactly. So today, I would think that's probably a little bit more difficult from a security perspective.
Yeah, but what's neat about it, in my opinion, is you got to not only see the world, but you really learned a craft that has become your career.
Yeah, 100%. Left the Navy and really stepped into a job. I remember I showed up. I got hired by Stewart and Stevenson. They're a gas turbine packager for. They used to package more gas turbines than GE did, and GE were the ones that produced the gas turbines. So GE eventually bought them, which GE is known for, right? Mm-hmm. And so I remember showing up at the Stewart and Stevenson office, fresh out of the Navy. I got handed a tech manual and said, "Hey, plant up in Canada is having some issues. I need you to go up there and help them, troubleshoot and fix whatever their problem is." And I showed up at this plant in Canada, and the guy took one look at me, and he goes, "You're fresh out of the Navy."
How old are you at this time? Like 24?
Yeah. I was mid-20s. Yeah.
So, little wet behind the ears.
Oh, yeah. He can tell just walking in, right?
How are you going to help me?
Exactly. Right. Because, you show up as the OEM representative. Yeah. You're the guy that's supposed to have all the answers.
You're the expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, did you go straight to work out of school, or did you go to, what was it, Rochester Institute of Technology?
So Mike, I've always seemed to take the more difficult path. Nothing in my life has come easy. After I did a couple years of school. Again, with me, it was more about financial support, parental support. I didn't have that. So, and I had to work, right? Because if I wasn't working,
you put yourself through it.
Yeah. Exactly. So I actually ended up finishing school after I got out of the Navy and went to work at a plant in upstate New York. And so trying to raise a family, working 70 hours a week, and then going to school at night to finish my... So
you're married at this time and have kids?
Yeah, my first kid.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And you're working, you're married, you have a kid, and you're trying to put yourself through school?
Trying to finish school because I knew that degree was important.
Yeah. When did you find time to breathe?
As I reflect back on it now, I'm thinking, where on earth did I find time? But again, you find time for the things that are important in life.
Yeah. And obviously family is.
Oh, yeah. So balancing those two was certainly not easy.
How long did it take you to get your degree doing it like that?
Yeah, funny you should ask. So it took several years. I was basically taking one class a semester.
That's all. What can you do?
Right? And what's funny, the first couple of classes was applied It was applied dynamics and applied mechanics. So a lot of diffie-Q, a lot of high order math.
Yeah.
And I remember like trying to rally up the folks at the plant, right? Because there were several, there's a lot of ex-Navy guys and gals in the power industry. And so I got like 10 folks to sign up to go to this program to RIT that the company would pay for. So 10 of us started. And after that first differential equation class, the applied dynamics, at the end of the first class, we were down to 2. This guy said, and then after the second class, which is applied dynamics, and I don't know why we started off with those 2, but most of us had some college and we were trying to complete. But after the second class, we were down to 1.
Everyone said, that's enough of that.
Yeah. But as it turns out, the company I worked for was Scythe Energies. That they got bought by Dynegy, and the maintenance manager position opened up, but it required a college degree. Mm-hmm. And I was on my last class, and so I applied, got selected on contingent upon me finishing that last class. So again, I'm a firm believer in providence.
Mm-hmm.
You do the right things in life, and the right things will happen. And so timing-wise, it worked out perfectly.
What's that? And I'm bringing this from a perspective of someone who did not have to put himself through college, who had a lot of advantages. What is that feeling of working a full-time job, raising a kid, and you finally pass that last class and you're going to get your degree? I mean, that's got to be just a burden off you.
Not just degree, but a promotion.
Add
right?
a promotion,
I went
yeah,
from
exactly.
basically technician controls, guy to maintenance manager. I mean, it's an incredible feeling of satisfaction, right? Accomplishment.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, appreciation. And again, I go back to the gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Appreciation, knowing, the amount of work that it took, and then being able to apply. Because I think, so I see it with my kids, right? Go through college, but if you're not able to apply that knowledge in something practical and meaningful, it becomes sort of more of a rote exercise, I feel, for a lot of these kids, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to apply that learning for it to really sink in.
Yeah. And just talking to you, it sounds you've been able to apply that learning at various points in your career. And you're doing all this at a pretty young age. You're still in your 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So talk about your career path once you got out of Rochester and got your degree and got your promotion. Where's all this take you?
So maintenance manager, at that point, we've been living in Syracuse now. Like I said, we spent almost 15 years up there. My wife, ironically, is also from Belize, but I met her in Virginia Beach. She was visiting friends, and I was stationed there. Talk about small world,
and
right?
And Providence, too.
Yeah, exactly. And so I dragged this poor woman up to Syracuse, New York, Syracuse was, don't get me wrong, I love Syracuse, the culture. My kids grew up in this neighborhood where they would roam freely, right? All the parents knew the other kids, right? So my neighbor can yell at my kid, and that's perfectly fine. Matter of fact, I would encourage it, right? If you see him doing something wrong, please correct them.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? So one of those neighborhoods, one of those communities.
But the weather's a little different.
150
right?
inches of snow a year, Mike. 150 to 200 inches. We would have to shovel our roofs every winter. And driving, so I lived in Liverpool, New York, and worked in Oswego, which is about 35 miles north of Liverpool. Just north of there, by the way, is Tug Hill Plateau, and every winter CNN is there because they have record snow, right? Mm-hmm. That place gets snow in feet, not inches.
That's that lake effect snow,
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And it all funnels down to the Tug Hill Plateau, and Syracuse gets a lot of it. And so driving to work, there were some days I would commute. There's a gentleman lived nearby, and we would commute, worked at the plant. And one of us would have literally our head stuck out the window just to see where the ditch is so we didn't go it, right? And then you would get these convoys that would be following each other through just blinding snow. It was amazing. I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
It's no Belize, is it?
Far from it.
How did your wife handle
it? 15 years, so I owe this poor woman a lot. So aside from putting up with me, putting up with that Syracuse weather. But again, we got to raise a family there. Really met some really good friends there. Matter of fact, I mentioned the difficulty my kid had transitioning. When we moved down to North Carolina, I actually sent him back the following summer to go hang out with his friends. Now, that was a leap of faith because, he's my kid and the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
How old was he when you said?
He was like 16. It was a year later.
That is a leap of faith.
But I knew, again, it was one of those communities where I knew the neighbors. They knew me. I had their phone numbers, and he was staying with a friend whose parents I trusted. Yeah. Right. But still, I mean, I think back on that today. It's like, ooh. But again, blessed for the opportunity.
Probably did him a lot of good, though.
Oh yeah.
Did he come back saying, "I really miss Syracuse," or I'm good where we are, and I still have connections with my old friends?
I don't know if I could 100% answer that. I think there was still a part of him that, was always be kind of connected. He's still a big Syracuse fan today, basketball, football, right? He's still a big Syracuse fan. And then where we moved to North Carolina, what's crazy, so Syracuse, right, it's -10, 5 foot of snow on the ground. Kids are outside. They're playing. They're outside. They're rolling around in the snow, right? Nobody's in the house. We get to North Carolina. The weather's beautiful. It's 85 degrees. We live on a golf course. Yeah. No kids anywhere to be seen. My kid's like, Dad, where's all the kids? It was just a different environment.
Was that because Pinehurst tends to be a little more retirement type community?
There definitely some of that. But there were kids. You just didn't see them, right? Because he got in a school bus every day, and there's a bunch of kids, right? So he slowly was able to make some friends and again acclimate again through the soccer team. Kind of got to adjust to that the North Carolina.
And that's when you were with Dynegy, right?
No, so Dynegy was upstate New York.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is Progress Energy. So my wife tapped me on the shoulders, 15 years in Syracuse, say, hey, it's time, right? You told me 5 years, because that was my story. Hey, got out of the Navy, field service engineer for a year, and that was crazy too, because I was they call it hot suitcase. So I would get home Friday, the phone would ring, and I'm on a plane to somewhere to go troubleshoot something. And so I was actually in New Jersey working on a cogen plant in New Jersey. They were losing money big time because, when these plants don't run, if they're in a forced outage, as opposed to a plant, they have planned outages because you have to do maintenance and equipment. But the plant was in a forced outage, and so they were losing something to the tune of almost $1 million a day.
Wow.
So showed up, and of course, there's no show up, go to the hotel, get a couple hours sleep. No. You show up, and you're expected to jump right in and fix the problem, whatever it may be. So I remember working 36 hours straight. This got there late Friday night, worked into Saturday, almost Sunday. And it just so happens their VP of operations was on site because, they're sweating bullets. They're losing a lot of money. And he basically offered me a job on the spot. He said, hey, we're building a plant upstate New York. If you're interested, here's the plant manager's phone number. They'll call you for an interview, but it's a formality. It's your job if you want it. So you want to talk about, again, providence, right? And no casual interactions because you never know who might be watching, right? I mean, I was technically being interviewed and I didn't even know it.
Well, and that's such a good point for anyone growing their career. You just never know what relationship you're going to build that's going to, and I don't want to say be beneficial because all relationships are, but can have a positive effect for you down the road.
Yeah, and not to sound that it's transactional, right? I mean,
right.
There's so much more to it. But it was an opportunity, right? So, for example, my definition of luck is opportunity and preparation. And I think about my undergraduate degree and being finished just in time for that maintenance manager position when it opened up. Again, it was preparation and opportunity, right?
You were prepared when the door opened.
Exactly.
The door opened, you went through. I want to go back and ask you a question about you showing up to these plants and them looking at you as the expert, and You're very independent. You're very buttoned up. You work hard. You study hard. Did you ever go into any of those with any sense of doubt going, gosh, they're expecting me to know a lot more than I really know? Does that ever creep in?
Every time. And it didn't get any better. I mean,
and it probably doesn't, does it?
Every time. You're expected to know, right? But, as I've gotten older, it's something you just embrace, right? I mean, that's life, right? I mean, the same like parenting.
Mm-hmm.
I seriously believe, and this may sound kind of draconian, but parents should have a license on kid rearing, right? Because I didn't know anything about raising my kids. I figured it out as I went along.
No, they didn't come with an instruction manual.
Exactly.
And it's a lot of trial and error, for lack of a better term. And then we also, look at how we were raised and try and implement that same thing because that's what we know.
That's right.
Yeah. It's good to hear that you've had that doubt because I think we all have a little bit of that imposter syndrome in us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, to this day, right? I remember my first plant in Wilmington, North Carolina. They had a fatality and I was sent there really to try to help improve the culture at that plant. And it was the first plant manager job. This was after I left Pinehurst. I was maintenance manager, ops manager. At which point, Duke's development program, this time it was Progress Energy, and their kind of succession planning, development planning to prepare you for a plant manager job is you do maintenance, you do ops, if there's an engineering, if it's like a big coal plant, to kind of prepare you for that next step. And so Wilmington was my first opportunity. At that point, I thought, man, I'd made it. It's the beach, right? It's the coast. Love the beach.
Wilmington's a great town.
Absolutely. Loved it. We were there for 3 years, got to shut down Sutton Coal Plant and do the startup and commissioning of Sutton Combined Cycle. Then I also had responsibility for another plant down the road in Lumberton, North Carolina. And absolutely loved it. My wife almost cried when I told her we had to go back up to the Great White North.
Well, I bet she did.
Yeah, because I got tapped on the shoulder to go again. Or some of our Midwest region was having some challenges. This is after we had merged with Duke, and I remember going out to the Midwest, leaving Wilmington, and they were red in all their key performance areas. I
Not
mean,
a good place to be.
It was like, wow, what have I got myself into?
Yeah.
But that's where you got to be careful so you don't develop sort of this reputation as a fixer, right? Because fixing is hard.
Oh, yeah. Every challenge you go into, you almost got to start over and go back to those building blocks and train everyone up.
And people don't like change.
No, and when you are the fixer, you're never the popular guy when you come in.
That's a fact.
Yeah, they're not glad to see you coming.
Yeah.
Now, how long were you with, was it Progress Energy?
Yeah, so Progress Energy, trying to remember when I moved down from, I think it was with combined maybe 8 years when I moved down from Syracuse down to Pinehurst. I was at Pinehurst for 2 or 3 years before getting that opportunity over in Wilmington.
How did you get on TVA's radar, and when did you join the Tennessee Valley Authority?
So TVA was actually recruiting. They were looking for someone to bring in to put in on their succession plan what they call a bench box. And they were actually looking at one of my peers, a lady by the name of Julie Turner, who I'm still friends with today. And she's sort of my peer over at Duke today. Very talented lady. She was over gas fleet. Matter of fact, I was working for her at the time. And then actually I was working for her initially, and then I became her peer. And so Julie Turner was known by a gentleman by the name of David Sorek, who was senior vice, he was vice president, but I think he was in line for the senior vice president role. And so he threw Julie's name in the hat. So they reached out to Julie, but Julie has some, family ties in North Carolina, so really wasn't interested in moving. And Julie said, I hate to give you this name because I'd hate to see him go, but this is the guy you really need to be looking at. And it was my name. And so, long story short, they reached out to me. TVA was not on my radar. I'd heard a lot of good things about TVA. TVA was somewhat the envy of the industry. Mm-hmm. But again, Chattanooga was not on my bucket list.
Yeah.
nor was Tennessee for that matter.
Did you even know where Chattanooga was?
I did. I mean, but just again, it was just not some place that I said, ooh, I'd love to end up in Chattanooga. But having landed here, I must say it was a pleasant surprise, and really have enjoyed the area.
Yeah. Back to the relationships, and is it Julie Taylor?
Yeah, Julie Turner.
I'm sorry. You just really don't know, where those relationships are going to lead you. Because if you didn't have a good, strong relationship there, she wouldn't have recommended you.
Yeah.
So TVA recruits you, and you come in to do what?
So I came in, I was general manager of Eastern Coal and Gas. So I had the Eastern Coal plants and gas, or gas fleet. And at the time, gas was not as prominent as it is today.
Mm-hmm. And coal was more prominent.
Oh, absolutely. Coal was king, right, for a good while there.
Yeah. So was part of that transition from coal to gas?
Yeah. So at Duke, I had both, right? So I had coal experience, I had gas experience, I had hydro experience. So it was a great fit for me from an experience standpoint. And I think you had Jeff Lyash on the podcast, and he talked about competence, commitment, and character. I have three similar skill sets I try to focus on. The first is technical, which is really the competence piece. The second is the commitment, right? Work ethic. And then the third for me is people. Because, to be an effective leader, you really have to have good people skills. And as I had to learn transitioning from, technician to manager, one, you manage process and you lead people, right? And two, it's all about people. And people, contrary to popular belief, are not creatures of logic. They're creatures of emotion.
True. So
that to me was really the more difficult transition, being sort of that analytical, right, problem-solving mindset that I had.
A lot of logic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then you deal with a lot of people, and you get a lot of emotion.
Nothing to do with logic.
Yeah. And then you understand why HR's there.
Exactly. Yeah.
So walk through your career path at TVA. You mentioned where you started, but what has that led to?
Yeah, so came in as general manager in this sort of bench box, and that led eventually to vice president of our gas fleet, gas and hydro, was first job with TVA, or second job with TVA. Came in as GM of Eastern Coal and Gas, went on to VP of gas and hydro. Really enjoyed that role. I was able to kind of focus on just those two technologies. And our gas fleet, right, there were some programmatic things. Again, my military background, I think, was well suited for just establishing process and rigor around processes, right? Firm believer, hard on process, easy on people, as we used to like to say. And to this day, it's something I firmly believe in. And so establishing process and rigor on a process, so it's not, Alan being a jerk, or this is what we need to do if we're going to really achieve our performance objectives, right? And it's not just about achieving performance objectives, but even more so being able to sustain the performance.
Well, and I would imagine safety comes in there too.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's four. I tell folks there's four areas, in our line of business that you have to be really good at, right? And it's SRCC: safety, reliability, cost, and compliance. And if you do good in those four areas, chances are you're meeting your objectives.
How has the energy industry changed just in the short time you've been with TVA? Because you came in gas and coal,
right?
And coal is basically being phased out.
Yeah. It's exciting, right? It's exciting to watch. One, we're going through this huge growth period right now, the industry as a whole, right? Not just TVA, and especially in this part of the country where we're seeing tremendous growth, which again is also exciting to see. It's a good problem to have, right? Challenging nonetheless, but it does come with some tremendous opportunities. And so being able to meet this growing demand, this build out of new, we're adding almost, I think it's a new plant every 18 months, just to meet the growing demand. And now some of that is some puts and takes. So in some cases, we're retiring some of our older coal plants and building some of the newer gas plants. but then with the focus on sort of what is that future technology going to look like? There's some things, other technologies that are being pursued across the industry. One we're looking at is small modular reactors, for example. I know fusion technology holds a lot of promise. But again, these are all things that are 10 years out, and we need the additional generation today, right?
Yeah.
So there's sort of this transitional period that we've got to go through, and that transition technology is gas.
Yeah, and you can't just flip a switch and say, okay, now we're all nuclear.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
There's a transition in there. What, as a customer, we all flip the switch, expect the lights to come on, expect the heat to be on. What do customers not necessarily take for granted, but not understand about energy that they need to understand?
Yeah, it takes a lot to make, we used to, our favorite saying, right? It takes a lot in our business to make sure nothing happens. And by nothing happens, I mean when you flip the switch, the light does in fact come on, right? And stays on. And there's just so much that has to take place for that to happen.
Yeah.
So there's the generation, there's the transmission, there's the distribution, there's all of those pieces that have all have got to be executed flawlessly to ensure that when you flip the lights on at 100 Cherokee Boulevard, they come on and stay on.
You guys are the offensive linemen of industry. Offensive linemen, you don't hear about them until the quarterback gets sacked.
Exactly.
You got to have all those perfect things happen. And as long as I don't hear about you, things are good.
That's right. That's right.
I do have a couple more questions before we got to wrap up. Did you ever think when you were filling those coal bunkers, when you were a kid, that you'd be working for TVA and in the coal industry, for lack of better?
No, you never know what life has in store for you, Mike. And but again, I believe in providence. I believe in doing the right thing. I believe in paying forward and helping others in the way that I've been helped along the way. To me, quite honestly, that's especially as I'm sort of in that second half of my career journey, my life journey. For me, the part that's most important is, one, helping to develop employees that are under my care and responsibility, and then more importantly, helping underserved segments of our community, which is where organizations like Urban League and Chambliss and some of these other groups are in Chattanooga. I'm so glad to have been a part of.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Why is it important for not just you, but why should people who are growing their careers embrace their community, get involved with the community, volunteer for those kind of things?
I see it as a responsibility. It's about, I'm a student of Dr. Jared Bell, and talks about we lead according to who we are as a person, and to be an effective leader, you must first become an effective person, and to me that means being engaged in all aspects of life, right? Not just work, but home, community, and having a positive impact. Especially, we've been blessed. We work for a obviously proven pandemic-proof industry, right, where there were a lot of other industries and different careers that were struggling. We didn't skip a beat. These are quite frankly the best jobs in the Southeast, right? And so, having been blessed to be in these roles, I feel it's a responsibility, not just an obligation, but a true responsibility. And to me, again, it aligns well with my North Star because it allows me to pay forward.
You do a lot. You got a big job. You got a stressful job. You're involved in the community. I got to go back and ask you this question. Do you relax by doing carpentry and that kind of thing?
Working in the yard, yes. I mow my own lawn. I do my own landscaping. So, yeah, well, my wife will tell you I don't know how to relax because I can't sit still. I'm always doing something. But, something I think about, so one of my favorite, and like I said, I'm a student of leadership, but one of my favorite writers, Publius Syrus, who is a Syrian, probably familiar with, he's got a number of quotes out there. Yeah. Syrian slave brought to Roman Italy.
Part of the Daily Stoic.
He was so brilliant, right? He quickly gained his freedom, and but one of his favorite sayings is, it is of no benefit to have learned well and not do well.
I mean, that gets you thinking too. Yeah. What a great point.
Yeah.
Do want to get to the last question, but this is a great time to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. And it's a huge thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. Alan, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You've got a fascinating life. And so I'm going to ask you my standard last question. What would you tell that 25-year-old Alan Clare is important for a happy life?
I would say stay the course. Stay the course, because as you can imagine, there are a lot of times in my life that I wasn't sure what the future may have held.
Yeah.
So stay the course, have faith, stay true to oneself, and then most importantly, enjoy the journey.
It is a journey. How were you able to tell yourself to stay the course? Because you're pretty young when you're going through all this. At some point, you got to get frustrated. Why am I being challenged like this?
Faith. There's no secret sauce, and then success. Right? Everybody has their own version, the definition of success. I love Maya Angelou's definition, which is liking oneself, liking what you do, and liking how you go about doing it. Because success is really relative,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
it has nothing to do necessarily with titles or money or belongings or anything else, right? But yeah, I mean, you really do. It's about hard work, commitment. It's those three skill sets, right? Again, gaining that competency in something, whatever that something might be, but be good at it, right? And no matter what you do, say if you're gonna be a ditch digger, be the best ditch digger, right? That commitment, which is the work ethic piece, and then people. I think it's so important, and I think it's something that we're losing today, especially I think about this younger generation, social media. We're getting all our information right off the internet.
No interaction.
People piece is so important.
Yeah. Well, this has been a very, I said fascinating earlier, but helpful conversation for me. I appreciate your perspective. And you said everyone's got a different definition of success. And I think that's truly important for people to understand, because your definition changes in different parts of your career too. I'm towards the end of my career, and my definition of success is not what it was when I was 30 or 40, when a lot of my definition of success involved a lot of envy. Yeah, saying, "Oh, well, why does he have that and I don't have that?" And now it's more just about being happy every day. Back to your morning cup of gratitude.
So to that point, right, is that people talk about work-life balance. I believe it's all about harmony. It's about finding harmony, because there is no such thing as work-life balance, especially in our line of work.
Yeah.
Right? So, but harmony, it's that peace, it's that happiness that you referred to.
Get it all to sing together.
Yes.
Well, Alan, thank you for being here. I really enjoyed getting to meet you.
Yeah, same here, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.